I'm Rafia Dagama, and I will, of course, I'm presenting this with my colleagues, and I see Professor Herter, your name is disappeared behind presented by module lecturers. But Professor Herter is joining us, as well as Advocate Msluba, and of course myself. We wanted to give you an assignment 1 feedback and talk to assignment 2 expectations, as well as provide for an Q&A session so that we could answer any questions. Of course, the narrated PowerPoints are online. You're welcome to have a look at those quite closely, and you will see that I think through this class, how you are also meant to interact. I just wanted to say it again. For the subject, you have to submit both assignments, so keep that in mind as we go through this. It is essential to do so. So welcome, and we will now commence.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Yeah, of course, Professor Herter and Advocate Msluba, please do say hello to everyone.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you. Thank you, Rafa and Prof.
The outline of this presentation is to talk to assignment 1. So we will give you oral feedback of what was expected. We have marked some of the assignments, and we wanted to, before we finalize them, make sure that, and before you actually hand an assignment to, that you have had some feedback, so you can make adjustments or edit as needed. So we'll talk to that. So we'll talk to what we expected, and then we'll go into a little bit of detail of the content of your assignment, what was required, as well as the sources. There will be a pause for a Q&A section, general one, not necessarily to do with the assignments, and then we'll talk to assignment 2 expectations. The thing to do is that we have to talk to sort of common things that we find, and this is not content related, but it's incredibly important. And I know that sometimes with certain questions that seem a little bit open and there is discussion required, students feel like they have to tell us everything that they have read. But what we want is, and the reason we give you a page requirement, the number of pages you're meant to write, is that we know for a fact you do not need to write more than that. Of course, just keep in mind that as your lectures that are marking, if everybody writes, 6 and 8 pages, it multiplies over the number of students. That's the first thing. And I can tell you the page limits are very well thought out when we give them to you. So please adhere to the page limit. That will be something I'll mention just now. And then second thing, and this is incredibly important, as a future lawyer, as a good academic student, the only tools you have in our field, in the field of law, is words. And how you write things is very important. The College of Law has a system that we like that's called the Scholar system. It's called the Scholar system. You must follow those guidelines when it comes to your referencing and so forth. So please make sure that you adhere to those. And also, I mean, and for example, if you look at, previous assignment feedbacks that's been given over the number of years, and of course the recordings are available, or, the written sort of feedback is there, copying and pasting from that will show up in your writing. We'll see how the tone of your writing changes. So it really talks to how well you write. So those guidelines are there to help you write better, and your citation has to follow the correct system. As a note there very specifically, we do notice, and this is, I know I said it in, I think, the last live class as well. Your lecturers are very good at knowing if something looks like that of another student's. And plagiarism isn't just copying what's out there written by somebody else. Plagiarism means just taking the work of someone else. And guess what? Someone else can be a fellow student. So we are warning you, and we continuously warn you, because it will, these things go through Turnitin, and at some point your lecturers pick things up. So please do not take chances. As I've said, students exceeded page limits, and of course did not follow the guidelines on referencing, and it really sets the tone of how we are reading it and so forth. The library has available this wonderful add-on to Word, which is called RefWorks. If you use that, you just set your requirements to the College of Law guidelines on referencing, the Scalar system, and it provides it for you. You can easily just put it in, as long as, of course, you have put in all of the references in the site itself. So it's fairly easy. Remember also, for this subject, it's even easier for you. You don't even have to go to the library site. Every single extract of a book, every single article, every single case is on the module site. All you have to do is go there and look it up. That it's fairly easy. I know that they're not all put under very specific headlines, but you're meant to read all of them. And when I read and study them, so you should be able to go to make those references, and you'll see the list that comes up on the sources in terms of what we were expecting. So this takes care of common mistakes. The first one was research. The second one, this is I'm going to talk now to common mistakes in research. And this is when you read from a secondary source. That's the first one. We discourage it as much as possible. You'll see when we ask for the discussion of the Kettler case, there is a specific article that also references it. So the idea is not that you will choose one or the other to read. You should actually look at both of them and be able to, respond to the question posed. We expect you not only to say, have you looked at this article and just reference. We want to know, we want to see in your referencing paragraphs or page numbers of cases and articles. So that is, you don't want to make those mistakes. And usually this comes in not having done that if you are reading from a secondary source and that you're ignoring the primary. So I'm going to reference the sources. So those ones are the ones we expected. If you went out of it, as long as you reference these ones, in addition to that, you looked at something else, great. But, we provide those articles and cases and extracts of books because they are important for this. They are peer reviewed and important and valuable for this course. So please, 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 look at those, look at all of those folders that are there on the My Module site. And of course, if you use a source within a source, it should still have been consulted firsthand. So let's keep that in mind. Okay, so the content of assignment 1. What were we expecting? And this
Mr.
is
Garma,
yes, go ahead,
my
please.
apologies. May I just add one or two things? Yes, just to add to what Mr. Garma has mentioned now. It is rather strange if we see references to some of the sources that we did not prescribe. As Mr. Garma mentioned, that is encouraged if you incorporate other sources you found on your own. Terribly discouraging when when a student indicates an assignment that a resource that was not prescribed was used, and the date accessed indicates that it was accessed in 2009, for example, then you can clearly see that's not something that a student consulted, but that was merely copy and pasted. So you must be very careful of concluding resources you did not consult yourself, because that is rather obvious to your markers that you did not consult that resource yourself. So that immediately distracts from the quality of your answer, and it is rather a well, it could be a clear indication of plagiarism, depending on what is written in the text. So we encourage the use of resources apart from those prescribed, because the wider you read, obviously, the more you know about what we're trying to teach you. But you should be very careful in how you use those resources. Another example is where you do not cite even one of the prescribed materials, but you list 5 or 6 or only one other non-prescribed resource. That's also a very troubling indication that there might be signs of plagiarism of previous assignments or questions, or secondary resources used without it being consulted personally. So be very careful. All of these are telltale signs that the work is not your own. If you cite other resources, but you do not use any one of the prescribed resources, that's problematic. And if you mention that you used other sources, but your reference is outdated or it's used within the incorrect context, then we either know you did not consult that secondary resource, or we are rather convinced that there's some form of copying and pasting and plagiarism involved. So be careful, please.
Thank you. I'm actually going to, for each section, I think it's best that I stop and just look to you and Advocate Ntipa to make sure that that we are we are telling the students all of those. Those are excellent points. Exactly that. I mean, as Professor Hurt has just illustrated, it's fairly easy for us to pick these things up. Did someone let in the student who was trying to get in?
Can I say something, right?
Sure, go ahead.
Thanks. And thanks, Prof, for highlighting those important issues and rights. I think I want to let on what Raifa indicated about the page numbers. One of the matters that probably is worth noting is also focusing at the question and how it has been directed. The taking the response from another section into another section is another thing that ends up with responses being unnecessarily long, because the case is being requested for another section. So when it's used in another section, it becomes, I'm just citing an example. And also the fact that the part A was very clear about the regulatory framework. And lastly, it becomes important that we don't mix sections. We take section 45, we throw it to another act, because it then shows that there's something that is problematic somewhere. We need to know the sections and as they relate to the particular regulatory framework, especially in an assignment. Thanks, Ray.
Thank you. So I'm going to now talk to the content, and once I've talked to the content, I'll stop again just to allow Advocate Ntipa and Professor Hurter to come in. I hope no one finds this little box irritating. It's just, I just want to make sure that I'm letting people in. So this was quite important, I think, and for me, it's something that even, you know, so every now and then we tend to talk about spam and direct marketing as if they're the same thing, and they're not, of course. And I think that's very, very important to be able to really show, you had to show us that you understood that spam and unsolicited communication as well as direct marketing are two different terms and what they mean. This is very brief. So remember, throughout what I'm saying, we wanted a deep discussion on a lot of different things, and you had to really go into the meat of things. You had to identify, of course, the applicable legislation. And here we have 3 acts that come in. The first is Section 69 of OPIA. Of course, there are a number of conditions. I think there's a few of them. I can just make a reference to some of them. Condition 2, processing limitation. Condition 3, collection for specific purpose. Condition 6, openness principle. And condition 7, security safeguard. Condition 8. So all of those you had to make some sort of reference to some of that. Looked at Section 69, of course, in great detail. Section 963A and B are very important. You also then had to look at Section 11 and 12 of the Consumer Protection Act and Regulation 43 to the Consumer Protection Act. You had to also then go into detail of the ECTA. Here we go, admit, Section 45, 50, and 51. All of these had to be referenced, had to be discussed, and when I say discuss, I mean a deep discussion. Of course, you had to also reference Clause 10 of the DMASA and really highlight sort of the regulatory things that, the how it's, just reference some of that. Of course, that would be, you would do that much more when you're talking to the Kettler case. So these are sort of the bare bones of what we expected in your discussion. And sorry. So for the second part, it was important to, of course, you had to tell us what the case was about. Facts of the case, decision of the court, in detail, highlight the role of ISPA as industry regulation, as well as, of course, there was the article by Pistorius and Cloudy that you had to bring in. So there was, we really needed to see your interaction and with the case as much as possible. And I'm going to just pause that before we go on to sources. Professor Herter, and if you may add to it, and then Advocate Natsluba.
Thank you, Mr. Garma. If you read that case carefully, you'll note that there are a number of issues within that case that are discussed, that are relevant for the decision of the court and the facts of the case. So part of the expectation was that you identified what was relevant in context of your assignment questions, in context of the specific part of the prescribed material we are dealing with, and we wanted your feedback in your assignment from. So that was part of the exercise, is for you to identify what is really relevant within that case, because a number of students also discussed some of the other concepts discussed within the case that were not necessarily relevant to the question we asked and to the context of the assignment, what we wanted you to explain to us. So that was also something that was rather prevalent, is students not identifying exactly between the number of issues discussed within that case and by the court and presented by the facts. A much broader or inaccurate answer to the question that was actually asked. Just as an aside, as always, you need to really focus on the question that was asked and not give us information that was not asked for, because it ends up not being a proper answer then, because you end up not providing what we asked for. Thank you.
Advocate Natsluba.
Okay. Thank you, Refa. Thank you, Prof. I think Prof has said, has succinctly put it, I mean, in simple terms, that the case deals with a number of issues, but the part A, but in its very nature, was directing in terms of what is it that in that case you've got to distill, and it's one of the exercises that we must get used to in relating the parts of the question, so that you are able to lift the actual argument in the case that relates to the issue at hand. Thanks.
And I mean, this is also good practice. I think just keeping in mind that you know, even when you have in the future when you're practicing, you will look to cases and they will deal with a number of things. Nothing in real life is as uncomplicated as the cases, the questions we give you, at least facts of cases that we set out for you to deal with. So you have to shift through these things to get to the right answer. Sources, and this I'm going to more or less sort of run through. As you've already understood, you needed to look at ECT, the ECTA, the POPIA, CPA, very specific sections we wanted you to reference. And then there are a number of articles that we wanted. So, you know, Hammond and Papadopoulos, Marks and O'Brien, Papadopoulos again, Odia. So of course you've got sort of the main sort of person who likes to write about this, Papadopoulos. You know, there's a few articles they've written and they're very interesting and very important and linked to what you were meant to write about. And this is exactly why, if you look at this relatively long list, you'll see that there really wasn't much of an opening to bring in a lot of other outside things, because you really had to look at all of these in quite detail and reference them. And of course, the Kettler case and the Pistorius and Cloudy case on whole of Shrine double standards for spam. So all of these, we were expecting to see them in footnotes or some reference where, you know, and specific reference throughout. I'm just gonna pause here again before we move to the next slide, which is setting up an opportunity for Q&A. Any additional points on assignment 1 from Professor Herter or Advocate Sluba?
Yes, thank you. Even if you provide a good answer, but you did not provide the resources that you consulted in providing that answer, that affects the mark that you were awarded quite substantially. So please mention the sources that you consulted, and do that throughout your assignment. Because if you just list a number of resources, but you did not indicate in your assignment where you got the information from and from providing your answer, I mean, you could have potentially listed all of these between 8 to 11 resources, and we think you consulted them. It is quite clear when you consulted a resource or you didn't. So don't just put down resources that you did not consult. And if you consulted resources, include that in the text part, not only in your bibliography, so that we can actually determine whether you consulted that resource or if you are just mentioning it because it was subscribed. And if you provide us with a good answer, but you do not refer to any of the prescribed resources, that's a huge problem in awarding the mark. So even if you provide a good answer, but you do not provide any reference to resources to your answer, then that will ultimately have a substantial effect on the mark you will be awarded. So please note the fact that you need to reference your sources, and those references need to be accurate in your text throughout the answer to any particular question, in order for us to determine whether you actually consulted that resource. And if you end up only referring to one resource, but your answer is very detailed, that will affect the ultimate mark you are awarded for that answer. So all of that is taken into account when we award your mark regarding the overall impression created by the answer you provided us, and not listing any resources or resources that we can clearly see you did not consult yourself will affect your mark. It's as clear and as simple as that. So please mention resources, mention as many of them as possible, but only mention them if you consulted them. So that to us is an indication of the mark you deserve to receive for your answer. Thanks.
Thank you. Advocate Nslooba.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Prof. Probably two things. One, when dealing with reading material, the reading material has got bills, it has also acts. It is important that you focus on the act, because that's the ultimate law that was accented by the president, instead of going back to the bill, unless, which is in rare cases, if there's anything that is in the bill that would not be in the act. That's one. The second one, it's also in terms of just reading the question. I want to go back to what I said in the beginning. The first part was saying using the legislative aspect, the legislative framework. So it already directs you that you are using the legislation as the launch pad. The other one is the application. And I think it's important that we get to the habit of actually trying to use what has been asked to answer, so that we don't include other matters that are not necessarily at that point, and unintentionally increasing the number of pages as has been indicated earlier. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm now opening up the floor to students for any questions on their side that they may have. Advocate Nslooba, Professor Herta, if you can, I can't see hands, so if you see any hands, could you direct that student to speak?
Sure. Any questions, anybody? Yeah. Can be about anything. Yes, there we have an hand.
Go ahead.
Okay, good afternoon,
Lady,
lecturers.
you're welcome.
Thank you for saying worried about anything, because I really wouldn't have asked anything. I'm actually very worried about the entirety of the module, because I think it's quite hard where one does not actually know where to start. Yes, there is the PowerPoint, and there's no study guide. So you rely on the prescribed material, but to navigate yourself in order to understand and apply the question to what the answer could be, because now you find yourself as a student having to figure out and also looking at the time frame of when the question, like assignment 2, to be honest, the question, I think it's only when, like 3 weeks ago. So having to go through the material and apply yourself, I think there's just pressure. So I think as the lecturers, it would actually be quite helpful, if it is there, I'm not aware, where you actually show students how to go through material, how to apply yourself, how it can make sense. Because I tried to write down the entire legislations for LML, and then, okay, but link the journal articles where they could apply, but it's quite overwhelming, hey? So if you can kindly assist with channeling it out. Thank you.
So you're done with your question, Aledi?
Yes, Professor. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, no, it's a good question. I do appreciate the question you asked. All students go through that constantly, and we've all been in that situation, and you'll be in that situation many times more with whatever career you choose. It is about refining your approach to getting to what is really important, and that's part of studying. Fortunately, I'm not even going to say unfortunately, because it is identifying what is relevant. And that's part of being a student, and part of being in practice is to really determine what is relevant. So I do not have a precise or short answer to your question. I do understand very clearly what you're trying to say. But the questions are rather specific. In terms of you should be able to identify exactly what part of the prescribed module plan, so to speak, we're dealing with within a particular question when asked. If you look at the module and the resources you are provided, it'll take a bit of time, but not too much time, for you to identify the number of main topics we deal with in the module. And then if you need to prepare an assignment answer. It'll be necessary for you to look at the particular topic within the module that is relevant to the question. So at that stage, even though you need to read all the prescribed materials for the module, in your preparation for the assignments or the exam, in writing that particular answer to the assignment, you will not need to consult all the resources to the other topics that form part of this module. So you'll be focused on the question and exactly that topic. And then there are a number of resources dealing with that particular topic, and you will find the answer to the question we ask within the particular prescribed material relevant to that particular topic or question. So you need to refine as you go along. It's like a pyramid. You do not need to consult all your resources or know them off by heart, or summarize all of them in order to be able to answer a particular question within a particular topic. So you move up the pyramid, so to speak, to put it a little bit more visually, and you end up with focusing on what is relevant to that assignment only. And then you still distill it further. And the top of the pyramid would then be the answer you provide to the question. And that will be rather condensed in context of all the different resources you were prescribed. Your answer will be a condensed version of the relevant resources and what you took from it. So I hope that helps a little bit. I know that it's not a recipe. It's not a and unfortunately we all have different ways of reading, studying, making notes, condensing material in order for it to make sense or be able to provide feedback to other people, like your markers, to indicate that you gained certain knowledge from the material that you read or that you consulted. So that's unfortunately part of studying and being a student, is to be able to read and condense and ultimately summarize information in such a form that you can answer a question appropriately. I hope that makes a little bit of sense.
I would like to come in there, Professor Hitt, if I may. I just wanted to, well, exactly, we have a very specific list of topics. Remember, this is not everything to know about electronic commerce. It's far too wide to try and teach it in one term. So it is a closed list of topics. The articles are very specific to each topic. E-commerce is as I've said already, it's a very wide topic, and there are many, many complicated issues. But even authors stick to one thing or the other. If they're talking about tax, they're talking about tax. If they're talking about industry regulation, they will talk about that. If they're talking about specifically spam, you'll know that this belongs under this topic. That's the first thing. Second thing is, as a fully online module, and I know 3 weeks sounds fairly short, but keeping in mind that as final year students who are doing optional courses, there is and perhaps an unreasonable expectation on our behalf that you will engage with all the material, regardless of what assignment is being given to you. That's the first thing. So firstly, of course, there are very specific topics. You can slot them in. I think in our vision of how the course works, that it is fairly easy. At least articles are fairly easy to slot in. Cases, you'd have to read them and still slot them in, and know where it's important. So there is a little bit of initial work that you have to put in, well, quite a bit of initial work, and of course that expectation quite unreasonably on our behalf of that you will definitely be engaging with the material, and that there's a series of skills that over the last 3 years that you have acquired to engage with reading material. Finally, of course, keep in mind that your exam is an open book exam that occurs over a number of days. So I do think that if you take all of that into account, the flexibility of those sort of things, I think there is an opportunity for you to do well. The way that's how I see the course. I don't know, and of course, Professor Hurt has talked about how to engage with the material and get to that answer, and to get to that appropriate answer. I hope that we've both been helpful. I do take into account, a study guide would, some of the other optional courses do have that. For a fully online course, study guides are not recommended for other reasons. It's just something to keep in mind. Professor Hurt, if you wanted to add something, and Advocate Nsluba, of course, if you wanted to chime in as well.
Just maybe, yes, it's a matter of, and as I mentioned before, there's not an ideal recipe. We all differ in how we read or how we study. But if you get the question, you identify the topic, then you sort of start at the basics. For example, and it's not a rule, it's just using an example in order to guide you maybe in the approach that you could follow if that is not your approach. These are your primary resources, and then you can do some more reading, which some students do, which is good. But start with your primary resources. Take the prescribed extracts from the textbook, just as an example. If you start there, then you already get a very good condensed version of the answer you need to provide to the question we ask. And that's by just reading your one resource, is the extract from the book we provide as prescribed material. So immediately all the noise and all the distraction from what looks very intimidating when in a bird's eye view, when it gets condensed to one resource you start with, that already sets the platform for your answer, that is very condensed, then it blocks out all the rest of the resources that are not relevant to your answer. And it'll be a lot easier immediately to identify then the other resources you may add or you should add. So that's what I mean by the example of the pyramid. You start with your basics and you block out what is not relevant to the question. And you keep on focusing and drawing it closer and closer to the answer we expect you to provide us with. So if we pose you a question, it is not that we expect you to provide us with everything that we prescribed you to read or to consult. It's a condensed version of the prescribed materials which you identified as being relevant. You do not need to, at that stage, in answering a 35-mark assignment question, need to incorporate all the prescribed resources. So it's a matter of focus. It's a matter of condensing the material. And just as the example I used, if you start with your prescribed extract of your textbook, you sort of already have a very clear idea of what is expected in your answer. I hope that helps, Naledi, of everyone.
And thank you for the question, because I'm sure you're not the only one that has that question. Is there any other hands at this point?
Lady, just for interest's sake, did our discussion assist you in any way? Is it a little bit clearer what your approach should be?
Yes. I think although it's a bit fast for me, I will wait for Ms. Degama's recording and then play it back. I understand the pyramid. I did hear you there. So that's something to work towards on. Thank you.
Okay.
Probably to just add on to what has already been said by Prof and Raf is that one of the most helpful ways, like Prof has said, you start with the actual extract from the book. From that extract, you are able to then pull out the sections of the legislation that are being referred to. So you work backwards into those sections, because even the legislation, you're not looking at the whole ECT Act or you know, it helps you because then you are able to see the linkages, and not only the linkages, but the sections that relate to the particular extract from the book. From there, then even the extract would have already spoken to some of the cases. It then helps you as a basis to go and distill the particular cases that are at hand. But there's nothing that beats just then making sure that you have summaries of what these sections are about, because the open book test has some presumptions in terms of you having distilled the information than a closed book. So it's important to show the real understanding of the concepts and the sections, both in the legislation and also in the cases as they apply the pieces of legislation. I hope, Naledi, that helps.
Albi, I said I saw you had your hand up for a few seconds there. Did you have a question? You're welcome to ask your question if you had one.
Good afternoon, everyone. I actually just joined because of load shedding. I couldn't. I think
okay,
I've just
it is a recorded session, so you will be able to listen to it afterwards, the entire session.
Okay, thanks. That was my question, if there's gonna be a recording.
Yes, it is. It will be posted on the module site, so you will be able to listen to the entire recording. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
And shall we one last? Is there any other hands? If not, then we move on to expectations of assignment 2. Shall I move? Okay. Professor Herter, you're going to be talking to this, so I'm going to mute myself.
Sure. The few observations I'm going to make regarding the second assignment sort of links to what we've already mentioned in this class and numerous times. If you have a look at that assignment question, assignment 2 question, you'll note that both the questions 2.1 and 2.2 are rather similar in wording, but that's on first glance. So what's important here in preparing your answer to the second assignment is to read the question properly. Make sure that you provide us with precisely the answer to the question we ask. Because if you read those questions, I'm going to read them for you, and it sounds rather similar, but there's a distinct difference in the wording to what we expect you to provide as an answer to the questions. It deals with the same part of the Act, of the ECT Act. So it would, on first glance, seem rather similar, but there's a distinct difference. And please note that distinct difference between the two answers we expect you to provide before you prepare your answers. 2.1 states, identify and discuss the provisions under the ECTA that gives rise to the ISP regime in South Africa. That question then, if you look at it carefully, you need to distill it to exactly the question that is asked, and that gives rise to the ISP regime. So there are only certain very specific sections within the Electronic Communications and Transactions Act that apply to that question in particular. So you will only provide us with the relevant sections that give rise to the ISP regime. Because there are many sections within the Act that deals with the ISP regime, but only a limited number of sections that deals specifically with the rise of the ISP regime in South Africa. So immediately, in context of what we said a little bit earlier, now you prepare your answer, or how do you distill what is needed from everything else to what you need to provide back for the answer. Those sections we want you to identify and discuss will be very specific. Not everything regarding ISPs discussed in the Act. That's not what we want. What we want is the sections relevant to the question, which clearly states gives rise to the ISP regime in South Africa. Then contrast that with the second question, which reads similar and sounds similar, but is not similar, or is not the same. It's similar in wording, but it's not the same. So we expect your answer to be different. The sections you need to focus on in your answer that we expect you to provide us and discuss is different than the sections you will list and discuss in question 2.1. So in question 2.2, we ask, explain to the new ISP, that's part of the question, the first part of the question, explain to the new ISP the limitation of liability of ISPs. So there you immediately see the difference between the two questions. It's the limitation of liability. So you only deal with the sections of the Act then that is relevant to that part specifically. The limitation of liability as outlined in the Electronic Communications and Transactions Act and applied in the South African context. Now again, you need to be discriminate in the answer you provide, and by that I mean the answer specifically states in South Africa. Now, if you look at the textbook, for example, as your primary resource, you need to consult first in order to provide a particular context for your reading and your research in providing us with a proper answer to the question. Then you will see that there are particular sections that deal with the particular question, the limitation of liability. And you will also notice that the textbook this discusses a number of other jurisdictions or refer to them, the articles we prescribe as well, to the regimes in different other jurisdictions around the world, for example, the European Union, in American law. You can add that as background, and you can use that to compare the systems in the regime in South Africa to the other systems. But note that the question specifically deals with the South African context. So adding the regime that applies in the United States or the European Union, or for example, New Zealand is also mentioned in your textbook and in some of the prescribed publications, you use that as background and to create the context of your answer. That is not the main part of your answer. So we want the South African context, and you only add international jurisdictions as part of the broader context of the answer you provide. But we want you to focus on the ECT Act, because that is why the question was stated in that particular manner. So that is what we expect you to provide. We don't want you to provide a very detailed discussion of the ISP regime in America. You can add that just purely out of context in order to explain your example within the South African context, which is what we asked you to provide an answer to. So again, you will only need to consult your materials that are relevant to the ISP regime. There are a number of articles dealing with that, so that will not be an issue to identify your primary resources or the extract of the book that is relevant to these questions. I'm going to reiterate again, there's a difference between the questions, so read them properly and provide us only with the sections that are relevant to that particular question. So that's as introduction. Then if that's not clear enough, is there anything within the second assignment or the questions that aren't clear that we can maybe try and elaborate on a little bit? But the essence of it is that there's a difference between the two questions. So provide the answer we specifically ask you to provide, please. Not everything about ISPs. Anyone with a question? Okay, let's leave it there for assignment 2 then. Mr. Gama, we can carry on. There are no questions. Thank you. Okay, again, questions regarding anything relevant to the module or even wider? Anything you're unsure? Okay, Naledi, there we go. You're welcome to continue.
Thank you, Prof. I just wanted to ask, regarding obviously assignment 1 and 2, and I don't know when we'll have them back, our feedback of our assignments. I just needed to know, when do you think the exam will be? And if we are going to have yet another class of the sort, maybe to just discuss the examination?
Firstly, we're still awaiting on the final examination timetables. There are a number of considerations that management need to take into account. Unfortunately, the lecturers do not have control over that, but we will post those dates as soon as we're able to, and then we will have a exam preparation class before the exam starts. Just a generalized discussion regarding the exams, how to approach it, what's allowed, what's not allowed, you know, a general discussion as we're having today. We're not going to discuss the paper or the question asked in particular detail. That we won't be doing, but we'll have a class more or less. You know, today we discussed a number of specific things regarding the assignments, but we'll have a general class regarding exam preparation, or, you know, if there's any uncertainty regarding the exam, in order for you to be able to ask questions. So we will schedule a similar type of open discussion regarding exam preparation or questions that you may have. Yes, we'll do so, Naledi.
I see
Yes, Naledi,
Naledi,
let's continue with you. Christian, I note your hand. Naledi, yes, continue.
Okay, sorry. I just wanted to ask, and it's directed to lecturers and students, because I don't know how many students are registered for LML4810. There's no announcement. Okay, I normally see this by default, to be honest, whether it's a class or an announcement that's put up. Because normally with my life, you would get like a pop-up or an alert. Just like how I realized assignment 2 is already out. I never got the notification. So I wanted to know, probably it's my push notifications perhaps, or are all the other students, others experiencing the same thing? Whereas you have to check your, announcements every now and then, but do they also get the push-up notification or not? Thank you, that's all.
In principle, when we post an announcement, you should receive notice of it, but it could indicate a number of things, like, for example, system errors, or so. You should, in theory, receive your notice on your My Life account that a new announcement has been posted. But just to be on the safe side, I mean, I'm not sure. They are, all students differ in the number of modules they need to take within a particular semester. But the general rule is to just go onto all the module sites for the particular modules you have in a semester, to just make sure about updates, or don't rely only on the pop-ups to tell you that go into the module site a few times a week, just to avail yourself of the fact that new information has been posted or not. That's always a safe bet. I would recommend doing that. So in principle, you should receive the pop-up reminder or notice, but check your module site regularly. Is that clear, Naledi? Is that?
Yes, thank you. Yes, thank you, Prof.
Okay, sure. Christian, I saw your hand was up for a few seconds there. Anything you want to add or ask? Christian? Christian, sorry, I see your microphone is on, but we can't hear you. Christian, we still can't hear you. If you're not audible, otherwise you must please post. You can write something on the chat. If you have a question. I'm not sure if Christian is still with us. Christian, we're going to move on. If you want to ask a question or post something on the chat, you're welcome to still do so, but I'm not sure whether, it's your connection or something different. But we're going to carry on if it's fine with you. Thanks, Mr. Goma. We can carry on. I think we're sort of done if there are no other questions.
Let me just check the chat. Sure.
I see Christian seems as if he's writing
typing.
something.
Yes, he's typing.
He's
so
typing. Okay, let's provide him with an opportunity to just post his question, because we can't hear him. Anyone else in the meantime that want to add something more or have a question maybe while we're waiting for Christian? No one else? Okay.
Yeah. Christian. I am the pop-ups. Oh, okay. This is what we can do is we'll make it known to my modules, because what we try and do on our side is of course post things, but also then each time we post, we post an announcement that has been done, because we are told by the my modules people that everyone gets a message. So I would hope so. I see you say that the 2 portfolios on 13th and 14th of June. And you say that I see in my preliminary exam paper that I'm writing 2 portfolios on 13th and 14th of June. We are still waiting final confirmation. There have been some issues with students being able to upload their various assignments, assignment 1 and 2. So we are still just awaiting certain confirmations. We'll try and get that out to you as soon as we know. Yeah.
Yes, I might just add something there. The 13th and 14th are mentioned there, but please keep in mind that your exam for this module spans over a period of a week.
Yeah.
So don't be fixated on the specific submission date. I know that it plays a big part in your preparation or your planning of your exam, but you have, if the dates are very close to each other, depending on what the other module is, whether it's a 4-hour exam or 2-hour exam or whatever the case may be, all modules differ in that respect. This is the exam for this module spans over a number of days. So it's not one day you need to be focused on. You need to plan your exam preparations in order to be able to submit your answers for this module. You'll have a number of days in order to prepare your answer to the exam. Close to a week or a week. So you shouldn't be fixated on one specific date. We'll tell you about the specific dates when it is posted and when we expect, or when you should submit your answer by. We will also be posting a letter to employer for those of you that want to take leave for that period. But we'll also mention that in our exam preparation class then. But it's all, you can consider all of that when looking at your exam timetable, that this exam is not written within a day or a few hours. You have a number of days in order to prepare your exam answers for this module. The lady, your hand is up again.
Yes, thank you. What you just mentioned now that the exam goes on for a number of days. I wanted to ask if there will be letters available for those that are employed, because we're only allowed a number of days to take at work, so per an exam. So if my employer can understand that, my
Yes,
exam
no,
will
we will post a letter to employer. The wording will be general in nature, but we will note the dates within the letter, and it's then up to you to make your appropriate planning individually for when you take leave or not. But the dates will be mentioned within the letter.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Christian, was that proper feedback to your question regarding your preliminary exam timetable?
A thumbs up would be fine. And I think Tabi had a question. Tabi, I saw your microphone becoming lighting up. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. I don't know. I tried to raise my hand, but it didn't want to. But anyway, I just wanted to say that on the issue of pop-ups, that what I find works for me, with the fact that I'm doing 5 modules, is that I almost every evening before I go to bed, I go onto my live emails and check if there's something new that's posted there. I think that helps because most of my modules, you'll find an email that says the assignment is open. Instead of going to each module one by one to check if there's something that's on the announcements, I just use my emails. That's worked for me so far.
And Thanks. Just as a further point to that, as lecturers, we're only allowed to communicate using the My Life email. So please actively use them, because we are not allowed to answer back on any other email that gets sent through. So we will inevitably, to an email sent that's not sent from My Life, reply and say, please send us the same thing, but on My Life. Through your My Life emails. So please utilize them and communicate to us with that. As you would notice that Professor Herter and myself and Advocate Sluba, we try our utmost best to reply to content-related matters and things. And if you do have a technical issues, of course, as a student, you should also send a message to my modules, but we can also forward your request to them if there's an issue. We don't know if there's an issue unless you tell us. So I'm grateful for you guys letting us know so that we can take it up. And just as a final thing for today, and I think have you been saying this, both assignments are necessary for you to have exam entrance, so please submit them. Do your very best. Thank you. And good luck with everything. I know that there are queries and questions. Tabi, I see your hand is up again.
Just one last thing. Maybe I missed it because I joined late. Is that where do I find the marked paper for assignment 1?
It will come to you as soon as we're done.
Okay, so I'll be able to see it via email. Will it be via email or will it be on the portal?
No, it will be on the portal. It would not be via email. But we've given detailed feedback in this session. So when you go and listen to the recording, you should get a fairly detailed answer. Directions at least.
Thank you very much.
Fikile, to answer, assignment 2 is due tomorrow. We are aware that there are some people who are experiencing some My Module issues. I'm still trying to get hold of some people just to figure out what's happening and if it's a just temporary today issue or if it's an ongoing issue and deal with it, so to speak. So the assignment is due
Yes, you should.
Sorry, maybe
Sorry,
on
Tavi.
the my module issue, I see that where you have to submit, it still says that it was due last week, and it says your assignment is now overdue. I haven't tried to check if it will allow me to submit, because
It should still allow you to submit. We have changed the settings to allow you to submit till the 26th, exactly as you say, Christian, 11:55 p.m. So as late as possible on the 26th.
Okay.
But try not to do it at that point, because if there's a technical problem, we cannot help you. You try and do it earlier, please, 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 please. Don't wait till 11:55. And that same goes for the exams as well. No, because I'm still trying to find out what the issue is. It was mentioned in a meeting, but no details were given. So I am actually going to first find out what the issue is. Lady. And if there is any at all, if not when, if it will be communicated through announcements.
Yes, but you must please prepare as if we are
Exactly.
sticking to the date. You
Please.
shouldn't expect an
Don't
extension,
relax.
please.
Yes.
We have no control over that. The dates are set on the system, so
Yeah.
please prepare according to the original submission date, which is tomorrow, as
Yeah.
Christian said, 11:55. But because of load shedding and system issues, please, as Mr. Gama mentioned, try and do it rather earlier than later.
Just as an added thing, most extensions are given by the universities. Yeah, we are not able to do those unless there is a special request that we do and we have a good reason to make that request. And at this point, I am not at all sure that there is a good reason. A request is not always, agreed to. So please keep that in mind. It is not in our hands. So please, please, please try and do your best, work to the 26th, 11:55. I just see Christian is still sending a message. Oh, Fikile, under assignment 2 on my modules. Oh dear. I can assure you is there. I was actually looking at it this morning, so it's definitely there. It's under assessment 2, my modules, semester 1 for this subject. I think perhaps you need to just talk to one of the students, because I cannot see a student's view necessarily. So perhaps one of the students can assist you if you have an issue specifically. And I will be downloading this recording and putting it up as soon as the meeting is done. Probably, well, it usually takes around an hour for it to download. So just give me that.
I see Fakile found
it. Brilliant. I'm really happy. We've actually gone over for this meeting. I would just like, have we? I think so. Yes. Just like to thank everyone. We had a very good interaction. It's always good to get questions from students because it moves the discussion forward. Professor, that's my last few words. Professor Advocate Natsluba, and then Professor Herter, please. Go ahead, Advocate Natsluba.
Thank you very much, and once more, thank you to this vibrant deliberations that we had, and I think the guidance was also very helpful in just making it easy for us to package. And like I said the previous time, I'm still want to say one thing. that you made the best choice by selecting this particular elective. You will see when you are doing your LLM how good you have been to yourselves, because you are going to be the sought after. Thank you.
Yes, I think we've covered most of the important things. So I'm not going to elaborate any further. Please stick to the assignment due date, as we mentioned. Stick to the basics in terms of how you approach your assignments and your exams. And by that, I mean, stick to the dates, plan properly, read what you need to. And then, yeah, the rest we said in the previous discussions. For assignment 2 due tomorrow, read the questions properly and only provide us with what you ask. Please include your sources, refer to them properly, and all the best with your assignment. And we will provide you with any information going forward regarding the exam. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you so much, guys. Have a great day further, and good luck with the assignment. And take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.
Thank you and shalom.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.